Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on our third installment of the Summer NSF-GRFP Prep Series. Today, we are discussing research plans, which are one of the core components of your application for the NSF-GRFP. I'm Dr. Matthew Plooster with the Graduate School Office of Fellowships and Benefits, and I am the campus's coordinating official for the NSF-GRFP, and I am also the Graduate Fellowship Advisor. So a key partner for those of you who are pursuing this award, here to help you be successful in that endeavor. What we will cover today is we'll go over just a brief reminder of what the NSF-GRFP is and the eligibility for that in case anyone joining us today is new and was not at our previous sessions. We'll then go into research plans, getting started, various considerations that you need to take into account, intellectual merit and broader impacts, how to structure your paper. It's a 2-page paper, various writing tips. We have a couple FAQs. They might be your questions, so they might get answered in the presentation. And then we'll go over a couple resources. At the end, as mentioned, we will turn off the camera or turn off the recording, and we will be able to take all of your questions that you might have at that point. And the camera will be off so you can unmute yourself and turn your camera on and have a conversation. Okay, so let's dive in. So what is the NSF-GRFP? It is a federally funded fellowship program for graduate students in research-based master's and PhD programs. And this is I believe, the oldest government subsidized education program, older than Pell Grants, older than federal loans, older than the Teach Grant, older than all of those. And its mission is to ensure the vitality of human resource base in science and engineering in the United States and reinforce its diversity among scientists, diversity among institutions, diversity among research as well. The GRFP does have a long history of selecting recipients who achieve high levels of success. About more than 40 Nobel laureates were probably 20, 30 years before receiving the Nobel Prize were NSF-GRFP participants. We have college presidents, college deans, federal government leaders, as well as, U.S. Secretary of Energy, Google founder, authors, etc. So this is a prestigious award, and when you receive it, you are in very good company, very storied company, storied history of recipients having high levels of success. And participating in the NSF-GRFP can thrust you forward into higher levels of success. That's what we're hoping here today. The fellowship is a 5-year award that comes with 3 years of funding. And the reason that there's 3 years of funding in a 5-year award is many of you have to, in your research programs, in your PhD programs, work in a lab, or you may be required to teach for a year. Various programs are structured in different ways. And so this allows you to hold on to the 3 years of funding for when it's going to be most effective for you. For some of you, that's going to be your first year of grad school. For others, you want to work as a research assistant or a teaching assistant while you're doing your coursework, but then you want to save your fellowship funding for once you have completed coursework and you're starting on your research projects. So that is going to be something that you would work out with your faculty advisor. The annual stipend for each of those 3 years is $37,000. That is starting this fall. Currently, it's $34,000, so it's going up just a hair this fall. And that is paid in monthly stipends to you. You also have tuition coverage for 3 years. You have career life balance. We have medical leave for those who need it, family leave, so parental leave if any of you are bringing new children into your home, adopting or having children yourself. You will also have access to other professional development opportunities, such as the NSF intern program, which can provide you with up to 6 months more funding, as well as research and travel expenses for that internship. Various PIs, labs, as well as institutions in general will have additional benefits on top of what the NSF will provide. Here at the University of Utah, I do cover your health insurance for 3 years. And for each of those 3 years of funding, I give you $2,000 for research and professional development expenses. So for expenses for your individual research, funding to go to conferences, I provide you with a total of $6,000 over those 3 years for you to do that. Some PIs will provide you with a fellowship bonus on top of the $37,000 a year. That's a conversation to have with your individual faculty mentor or PI. Other important benefits of the NSF-GRFP. This is a mobile award, which means you can take this to any qualifying institution in the United States. That means you have to be in a research-based master's or PhD program in a proper field and in the United States. This can't go international as far as where you're enrolled, but you can have research collaboration outside the country. Occasionally, this does give you a step up in graduate admissions. We hear stories regularly with NSF-GRFP where students will apply to a very competitive program, whether at an institution like the University of Utah, top public institutions, or private institutions like Stanford or MIT or Northwestern. We hear stories frequently of students being waitlisted, or in some cases, just not enough seats, you're rejected, calling up those programs saying, hey, I just got the NSF-GRFP, and they admit you. So that can provide you with a little extra bump there. This does provide you with the cachet of prestige and recognition. This does set you apart. This does put you up a step compared to other students in your field. This does boost your resume and CV. So whether you go down the road of academia and academic research, or if you go into the private sector, or if you go into federal government or state government work, this does provide you with a boost on your resume or your CV. And particularly pertinent to those of you who are planning to go down the academic route, but not exclusive to you, this does establish a pattern of seeking external funds and hopefully getting those external funds. Many of you are working in a research lab right now where a PI is funded by the NSF or the NIH or the DOE or other federal branches. Whereas, and that pays your wage, it pays for the research, it pays for the project, the equipment, everything there. So those faculty went out, they got that funding. When you are in that position in 10 years down the road, you'll be expected to get that funding. So what you're doing here today and applying in this cycle, that does establish a pattern of seeking funding, which will set you apart from other applicants when you are on the job market. To be eligible, you must be a United States citizen, national, or permanent resident. That is non-negotiable. And that must be at the time of application. Applications are due in October. You must be enrolled or intend to enroll in a research-based master's or doctoral program in an eligible STEM field, which is chemistry, computer and information science engineering, engineering more broadly, geoscience, life science, materials research, mathematical sciences, physics and astronomy, psychology, social sciences, and STEM education. A couple notes here. You must be enrolled or intend to enroll. Some of you are going into your first year of grad school this fall. Some of you are first year right now going into your second year, but some of you are juniors going into your senior year of college this fall. So this means that you intend to, the following fall 2024, be in a research-based master's or doctoral program. So if you are not going to be in grad school this fall, that is okay. Just want to make sure we're all okay with that here. And then on STEM education, a quick notation here. This is specifically those of you who are studying how STEM is taught. So this isn't, I'm getting my master's degree in an MED to be a biology teacher in high school. This is, I'm studying how biology is taught, and I'm leading those areas of study to then impact those who go to school to become a biology teacher, for example. If you feel like you're on the fence of what that is, meet with me, let's chat about that. And everyone else, definitely take a look at the solicitation, which is on the NSF's website. This will kind of break down each of these. What does chemistry mean? What does engineering entail and such? Because you will have to select a sub panel of where your research project will be. For most of you, you will be, let's say, a chemistry PhD student, and your research will fall under the research or the chemistry umbrella. But it is not uncommon, and it is perfectly okay for your research to fall in a different area. So your degree program, the name that goes on your diploma when you graduate might say chemistry, but your research might identify more specifically and more and with a better fit under materials research or life science. So definitely take a look at the solicitation if there are any questions about that. Who isn't supported? So we talked about who is, now who isn't. Joint science and professional degree programs. This is like an MD, PhD, JD, PhD. The NSF, if they are funding you, they want you to focus on your PhD or your master's. They want you to focus on your research and not be distracted with other programs, which includes business administration and management degrees, counseling, social work, clinical degrees such as MD, PharmD, history, except for the history of science education, except for STEM education, as we just talked about. Research within disease-related goals, unless you are biomedical. Engineering biomed has your own special nuance there. Clinical research, which includes patient research, clinical outcomes research, health services research, epidemiological and medical behavioral studies, pharmacological and non-pharmacological and behavioral intervention and studies. So the NSF does not compete with other federal research funding agencies. So if you are in an area that either an area of study or area of research that the NIH would fund, the NSF will not fund you. So for some of you, that might be the litmus test. Should the NIH be funding this? If the NIH should be funding this, then NSF probably is not a good fit. Happy to talk through that with you. Your PI is also a good, can be a good gauge for you on that. The application, what you will be submitting no later than October, when they are rolling deadlines in October, your transcripts from all degree granting institutions that you've attended, even if you did not graduate. So if you started at let's say UVU and you transferred to the University of Utah and you graduated with your baccalaureate here, you'd still include UVU's transcript in your uploaded transcripts. Statements, you have two of them, your personal statement and your graduate research plan statement. And that's the one we'll be talking about today. And reference letters. 2 are required, but up to 3 can be considered. You'll actually be listing up to 5. And so let's say your first 2 choices, life happens, and they are not able to upload letters of recommendation, but 3, 4, and 5 did. That still ensures that you have 5 letters of recommendation to be reviewed. Okay, now diving into research plan statements. Your personal, relevant background, future goals statement, and I apologize, I should say research. This is a maximum of 2 pages. Your personal statement is going to be 3 pages, but your research plan is 2 pages. Be sure to remember that distinction, 2 pages versus 3 pages. Single space, 12-point Times New Roman, 1-inch margins, etc. So the standard here, except unlike the papers you turn in for your classes, this is single spaced. Must address broader impacts and intellectual merit under each their own unique header. And this is your opportunity to talk about your research and the impact it's going to have and the professional and leadership direction that you'll take with that research. This is time for you to reflect on a couple questions here. What is my research question and why is this important? Some of you are going to have a specific research question, and that's largely those of you who are going to be second years this fall, rising seniors, and even those coming into graduate education, starting your first year this fall. You might not have that finite question specifically panned out yet. You'll want to pan that out. What is my proposed research project? So you have your question, what's the project going to be that investigates that question? And how will it answer that research question? What do I hope to achieve with my research? What are my expected outcomes? You're going to go down a path of a particular project for a reason. Why? Because you want to have a specific outcome. You're hoping that this project will answer something, and what will those results look like? What is necessary for me to conduct this project? Do I need certain resources? Do I need to have certain skills? Do I need to have certain leadership in my lab? So certain faculty mentor or PI supervising your project. How have I prepared to execute this project? This relates to the skills part and the experience. What preparation does lie ahead of me? So you might say, I need to have such and such skills or such and such experience. I don't have that yet, but here's what do I need to, this is a question to ask yourself, what do I need to do to bridge that gap to make sure that I do have that experience or those skills? So right now, kind of think about this with what you hope to do in your graduate program when it comes to your original research. Now we're going to go through a handful of considerations here, starting with your research problem. What is your research question? What is the problem you're aiming to solve? So your research question is all about solving a problem. It's not just, I'm curious on this. Why is it important? Why is it important for us to be curious about XYZ? How does this relate to solving human or societal problems? So how is this going to impact society? How is this going to impact life? How is this going to impact scholarship? Why is there still a problem? Is this something that has never been investigated? Is this something that researchers are looking at right now, but they're not looking at the right variables? You have an original spin on what's going on out there. How will your approach be different? You do not want to go into this saying, this is what's being done, and I just want to be a part of that ride. That's someone else's research agenda. You want your own original plan here. So what is going to be different? Is it different variables, different methodology, different analysis? What's cutting edge about what you are going to do? And what do you expect to achieve in addressing this research question? How will this impact your broader discipline? How will this impact interdisciplinary research? What are the broader impacts in the community outside of the research lab? Taking action. Your research question, what are you individually, going to do to address this problem? Not your PI, not the lab that you're in, not your program. What is it that you are going to do to address this problem? What are the necessary steps to take? Do you need to engage in coding? Do you need to do various experiments? Do you need to engage in field research? What sort of data analysis needs to be done to come up with your results? What are those various steps? You want to be specific in your research plan and how you're going to take action, but you want to avoid the minutia there. Sometimes we have students who will write their research plan and say, I will go into the lab, I will take these precautions like putting lab glasses on when I go into my chem lab. Okay, that's going to be an assumed here that you take those sorts of basic everyday precautions. That's just simply part of everyday lab safety. What is your timeline? You have to have a timeline. You have to think ahead with this. Is it reasonable for a PhD student to complete this, and what's required for your program? So especially for those of you on the newer side or rising seniors, looking ahead to just graduate school in general, it's very easy to think too big. I'll give a personal example here. When I was starting graduate school, and my background, I'm a social scientist, not STEM, and my area is education policy and leadership. So I went in with a project outlined, and my PI, my faculty advisor, pulled me aside and said, okay, this is a 10 to 15 year multi-million-dollar funded project. This is not a dissertation. This is what your dissertation can pan into for the rest of your career, but this needs to be pared way, 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 way down to just a brushstroke. So when you think about your research, your area of research is going to be the Mona Lisa. But your specific area, your tiny little niche, is going to be a brushstroke on the Mona Lisa. So don't worry about planning the Mona Lisa here. You just need to talk about that brushstroke. But you do need to talk about throughout your plan, why is that brushstroke important for the entire Mona Lisa painting? So I hope that differentiation helps frame that for you. So when we talk about what is your timeline, and is this reasonable for you as a PhD or a master's student to do, you don't want to have a 10-year timeline for a PhD or a 10-year timeline for an MS program, because you should not be in your PhD program for 10 years. Skills and tools. We talked about this already. We mentioned, do you have the skills and tools necessary to do your project? Well, what are those skills? Do you need to understand coding? Do you need to be skilled in quantitative research? What are those methodologies and such that you need to employ, that you need to be skilled with to execute your proposed project? If you don't have those skills, how will you be addressing this? And then don't feel too vulnerable about this, about the I don't have what it takes. No, that's just part of graduate education. Addressing the skills that you don't have might be, in my second year of coursework, I will take a class in XYZ, which will equip me for et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So how is your coursework going to help you fill in the gap? What will you be doing in a research lab that will fill in the gap? So a lot of what you don't have that you do need, you will be addressing in your program in general. You just need to talk about that. What sort of resources are needed? Do you need certain equipment? And where are you getting that equipment? Does your PI, will your PI be providing you equipment? Does your research lab or your department have the equipment or the resources that you need? Talk about that. Do you have access to the tools needed? Again, do you have those resources? What sort of support will your PI be providing for you? And are costs associated with your project? This is something to really think about here. Do you need to go and purchase equipment? If your PI is not going to be providing you with what you need, what costs do you need to be preparing for? Let's say that your research site is in the Great Lakes. Do you need to come up with a research budget to pay for your travel and your lodging and any equipment that you need when you're going to the Great Lakes to conduct your marine biology research? That's something to talk about here. And then how are you addressing that? If you are coming here to the University of Utah, you can say, the University of Utah does provide me with a research stipend as an NSF-GRFP participant. So I can use that $2,000 a year to pay for my research and my travel to the field research site. Otherwise, talk about that. Research risks. Those of you who have come to previous presentations have heard me talk about this in every single one. What are your research risks? This is a very mature thing to talk about in your application, and you definitely need to address that here in your research statement. Where's your plan vulnerable? So here's a good example. Let's say that you're doing field research in the Amazon forest in Brazil, and then a worldwide pandemic happens that shuts the world down, and you can't go to the Amazon to conduct your field research. What will you need to do to still complete your project and address your research question? We're all thinking about that a little bit more than we did 4 years ago. A few months ago, I was advising a student who was doing research, anthropological research for ancient civilization 10,000 years ago, and was working with a research site, an archaeological research site in Egypt, working with a government agency in Egypt. And so she was going to, as part of her research plan, she's going to go to Egypt and she's going to work with this government agency doing testing on certain dental artifacts. That's great. But what if something happens in the government and she can't participate anymore? What if there's another global health crisis and the borders are closed and you can't go and travel? Well, her plan B was, it's best for her to go and conduct the research, but there are other existing dental records out there that she can download and utilize. It's not going to be as good, and she would have to shift some of the variables in her research, but she could still execute the same research project for the most part and address the same research question with that plan B. So what's your plan B? Are you depending on a key relationship that isn't formed yet or might not pan out? What's your plan B if that doesn't happen? Is there a key step that might not come to fruition, such as a field test site that you don't have access to yet? What are the vulnerabilities with those relationships? What are your contingencies? What's that plan B? Plan B specifically here, when you are applying for a fellowship like this and discussing your research plan, plan B is not, okay, if this does not pan out, we're scrapping this entirely, and here's my new research question, here's my new research project. It's just, if you have variables A, B, and C doesn't happen, what are you doing to replace variable C? So what is that plan B? Every research plan has a risk. What will you do if that risky element does not pan out? Now, think about your reviewer, who your audience is. These are professors who do research, who supervise PhD research, who have been doing so for many, many years. So they're going to read your research plan, and what's going to go through their mind is, oh, this is a question mark right here. What if this doesn't happen? So you want to be ahead and address, I recognize that this might not happen for whatever reason. So here's what I will do in that case. So they'll be reading, yep, oh, question mark here. Ah, they're addressing that. They're really thinking ahead. They've really put a lot of time and effort and done their due diligence with this research plan. You want to be that person. Relationships. Do you have the appropriate PI or faculty mentor for this project? Why are they the appropriate person? Do you require relationships with individuals or organizations outside of your graduate program, outside of your university, such as a national lab or a researcher at another institution, a community nonprofit, or a municipality where you will conduct your research? That will be your field research test site, or other necessary relationships. What are those relationships that you depend on for your research to be success? Who's your audience? So this is a couple different directions here. Who will benefit from your research directly and indirectly? Who will be interested in your results? So when you think about your broader impacts and your intellectual merit, you have two different sets of audiences here. Intellectual merit, you have other scholars. You have scholars outside of your discipline, so that interdisciplinary angle. Broader impacts, how will the community and society be impacted? And then secondly, you need to know who your reviewers are. Generally, you will not know who they are individually. For the NSF-GRFP, you definitely will not know who they are individually. But in general, like you apply for a department fellowship, you might know the faculty. But with the NSF-GRFP, you will not know your reviewers. If there's any stretch of the imagination that they may be connected to you, they will recuse and have other applications to review. But there's a good chance that your reviewers will not even be in your discipline at all. They might, the question isn't, will they know my area of biological research? They won't be a biologist. They will be a chemist or a physicist or an engineer in many cases. So keep in mind, they are scientists, they are researchers, but they might not necessarily know biological research. And that's not a problem. They're evaluating the feasibility of your research plan, not why is it important for us to look at this particular aspect of photosynthesis. Again, I'm a social scientist, so pardon my STEM references. And then there are other constituencies here that you need to take into consideration. The scientific community at large, and what does that look like from your perspective? Government labs, government policymakers, for example. If you are studying something about, I advised a student recently who was studying materials research and how it, and the experiment she was doing could impact how roads are built, especially in high weather areas such as Utah, where we have snow 7 months of the year non-consecutively, and how the snow can really ruin our roads. Right now, we're going into pothole season, and her research would really impact how roads are developed, how they are built and constructed to not have potholes. So not only is that important for municipalities, the Department of Transportation might need that for policymaking issues. So think big in that way. That's why it's called broader impacts. Think broadly. How are you going to be communicating your results? So you get your results and you're going to talk about it in your dissertation. There's going to be a special little section there, results, that you will talk about what your findings are. But beyond that document, that manuscript, how will you be communicating the solution to the research problem that you have investigated? Generally, you're going to plan to publish. Some of you may have published already. So you want to talk about what are the targeted journals specific to your issue here. Don't just say, I plan to publish. Talk about the journals, specifically name them if you can. Will you share your results at conferences? Will you do a poster? Will you sit on a panel? Will you lead a presentation or a workshop? And which conferences will this be? And other efforts that you might have. Will you engage in various outreach? Will this be of interest to community organizations or municipalities? How will you go forth and share that? Talk about that. We get a question a lot with GRFP, but specifically this is with research. What if I'm a rising senior? What if I get into my program and my research, I'm still dedicated to doing research in chemistry in this particular area, but what if it takes an interesting swerve and the project really gets overhauled in a new direction? Well, you're still studying chemistry, you're still looking at your research problem, but the plan that you pitched when you were starting your senior year, will you lose your GRFP if you do not follow what you specifically proposed? The answer to that is no. There are no NSF-GRFP that's going to come around and say, hey, Jane or John, you didn't follow the letter of the law here. We're taking your fellowship back. That's not going to happen. And with that, same with the communicating of your results. There's not going to be someone on the other side that 10 years from now says, okay, did Jane, she said she would be in the American Journal for Physics Research. Again, pardon my STEM references here. No, there will not be someone saying, hey, they said they would be publishing in their journal, and I'm not seeing an article about their research findings in this journal. That's not going to happen. What the reviewers are looking for is, are you thinking ahead of where your research results are going to be valuable? That's really what you're illustrating here through talking about how you're communicating your results. And with that, return on investment, ROI, what is the return on investment that this research project will provide for you specifically? Is this going to be a stepping stone into academia? Do you plan to go on the 10-year track after your PhD, and this research project is going to be the start of a much larger research agenda where you take it to new levels? Are you learning new marketable skills? You might have to learn coding. How is that going to be helpful for you after you graduate? Is this your foot in the door with a national lab or a government organization? What other benefits are you going to be getting from this? What is the return on investment of you conducting this research? Okay, we talked about intellectual merits and broader impacts numerous times already. And for those of you who have watched the previous presentations, you've heard me say intellectual merit and broader impacts a million times. It's very important. So I'm hoping the repetition is sinking in here. For your research plan and your personal statement, you do have to mention specifically broader impacts and intellectual merits under specific headings. No header, no review. So that it's that important. So for your research plan, your intellectual merit is going to be, why is your work important? Why is your research important? What contributions are you making to science, to the discipline, to scholarship in general? How will this be impacting researchers in generations to come? Okay, that's your intellectual merit. Your broader impact for your work is going to be, what's the broader, it's in the name, the broader impact of your work? How is this going to impact human life and society? How is this going to impact the world that we live in? Why is this important outside of the ivory tower of our research labs in academia for this research to be done? So what's that ripple effect that your research will have outside of your discipline? So to go over this once more, intellectual merit, the value of your project to your discipline and greater academia. What is remarkable about your research? What's unique? What's cutting edge? What's state of the art about it? What is your contribution to existing science? How are you building upon the foundation that has been made, that has been laid already? And what are the problems that you're finding in that you're using your project to address? What is your innovative approach to your research? People have been researching STEM for generations and generations and generations, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years. So what's innovative about your step that you're taking with your research? What is your research training, and what do you need? Again, there's that gap. What will you be doing to further train for conducting this research in your program? And how will you be communicating that research? Broader impacts, the importance of your research to society, to the broader world, how it's going to impact human life or animal life, marine life, etc. Describe the relevance of your research to society. Are any specific communities impacted? So this is where you get to define what is the community. Your community might be Salt Lake City. Let's say that you're doing research with the Great Salt Lake and the many problems that we're having with the Great Salt Lake drying up. That's going to have a huge impact on the Wasatch Front, on Utah, on our population growth, on our economy, on so many different things. That's a broader impact if you are working on solving that problem. And so you define that community. But let's say that you are going in a different direction and your project is on, let's say, neuroscience methodology here. Well, that's going to be impacting a broader community of scientific and medical and such. So while you're not doing patient outcomes research, as a neuroscientist, you might be exploring a research problem that then others will take down the road to study and utilize those results, that new theory, those findings, to conduct Parkinson's research or dementia research or what have you, which will then impact a broader community. So that's that kind of differentiation. Your results can absolutely have that medical impact. It's just not what your project is specifically doing. So there's that small differentiation there. What sort of outreach will you engage in? What sort of leadership role will you have with your research? So maybe not just with the project, but moving forward. And can you quantify your impact? If you can use statistics with your intellectual merit and your broader impacts, fantastic. Use those. Absolutely. And I did just get a question. Will the slides be available after? Yes, the presentation we're going through today, as well as all of our previous presentations, are uploaded to our website. You can access that right now with our previous, and soon this will be uploaded, nsf-grfp.utah.edu/workshops. And you'll have our previous presentations, the video, as well as the slides. Okay. So we've talked about a lot of different considerations that need to be going into how you conceptualize your research and how you talk about it. We've talked about the really important factor here of intellectual merit and broader impacts. Now let's talk about your 2 pages. 2 pages, 12-point font, single spaced, 1-inch margins, etc., etc., etc. This is a suggested layout. Use whatever structure is going to be best for you, your project, how you want your ideas to flow, but this is a suggested structure that may be helpful for you as you start out. I do want to really reiterate that there's more than one way to structure a paper. This is simply one of them. So introducing your paper, your research idea, briefly mention the intellectual merit or broader impact. What is the hook? What is it you're doing to draw the reader in? Then outline your research plan, your objective, what you're trying to achieve, the research question, your preparation for conducting the research. What is your approach, your methodology? You have to talk about your methods. You have to talk about the how with all of this. Again, second-year applicants, you're going to have a better idea of this than first year, and first years are going to have a better idea than rising seniors, but you need to talk about this as best as you are able. The reviewers do keep in mind second year, first year, rising senior. So you won't, if you're rising senior, you won't be expected to be as defined as a second year. So I know some of you are worried about that. Hopefully that answers some of that question there. But yes, you still need to talk about your approach, your methods. Talk about your data variables. What are the different pieces that you're working with here? How are you collecting that data? How are you analyzing that? What sort of lens are you looking through as you conduct that research? And what do you expect to find? What are those expected outcomes, those research findings, as well as anything else you expect to learn from the project? So you're not just conducting research for the sake of conducting research or the sake of answering a question. This is also a learning experience for you. You're a student. So what will you be learning from this as well? We talked about some of the skills that you might get from this. That might be a good ROI. You might have to learn coding to do your project, for example. That's something that you're going to learn from this entire process that will be valuable for you outside of this research project down the road. And of course, your timeline. Then moving on to your second page, discuss the practicalities. What are the research risks? Are there different vulnerabilities or sensitivities that you need to address and acknowledge? And then what are your contingencies? What are those plan Bs that you have to take into account? Then you have your intellectual merit under a specific header, and then your broader impacts, again, under a specific header, and then your conclusion, and then if any citations that you have, you would then list them there. As you are introducing your research plan, you have to have that hook. We're all going back to English 1000, where we learn about hooks. What the purpose of that first paragraph in applying for NSF graduate fellowships, you have to use those same principles. You have to hook your reader in. Here are some suggested hooks. Again, do what is best for you, but this might kind of get the wheels turning for you. What are you hoping to solve with your project? What's the question you're answering? Talk about that. What's innovative about your project? You know, we've been studying soil for hundreds and hundreds of years, and scholars in the past 100 years have been doing that, blah, blah, blah. But I'm doing this with this really unique variable or this unique lens or methodology that sets me apart from everyone else. That's the innovative side of it. What's a problem that's left unsolved that you're hoping to solve? And that could be more broad societal issue that could be specific to that scientific area. And also, why have other solutions been ineffective? That's something that you will want to address somewhere in your paper. That could be your hook. It might be elsewhere. And what broader impact are you hoping your project will have? That can be a good hook there. Jumping in and saying, here's how I'm changing the world. And then honing in on the how I'm going to change the world. Okay, so we've talked about all of these. We've looked at your suggested structure and some hooks. Now you outline your paper. Think about that hook, then outline the plan. The who, what, where, when, why, how. So this is where you then bring in those methodologies, those variables, the resources, skills, equipment, everything. You discuss your risks and practicalities, intellectual merit, broader impact, conclusion, and citations. So start somewhere here as you start conceptualizing what your paper will look like. Some writing tips for you. Write clearly. There's this stereotype out there that scientific writing is dense, difficult to read, and such. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, this is your chance to prove all that wrong, and you be pithy and succinct, be interesting with what you're talking about. Let your passion show. If you write impassioned, it will show, and it will make it easier for us reviewers to read. But you only want to include what is necessary. Again, your research plan is 2 pages. 2 pages. Omit unnecessary language, especially technical jargon. Scientists and researchers will be reviewing this, but they will not be in your specific little niche area of research. So if you're using technical jargon, it's easy for us to put on that cap of, okay, everyone in my world, in my little research world, knows XYZ. But that might be just within your little niche area, and you have reviewers' audience in this broader area. So if you can explain something in layman's terms in a pithy, succinct way, do that instead of using technical jargon. Use shorter words over longer words, longer and more complicated vocabulary. Make sure each sentence is purposeful. Again, 2 pages. Use effective repetition, past research experiences, research skills, originality, awards, publications that support your work. You feel free to repeat things between your research statement, your personal statement, and even within those statements, if it makes sense, to repeat. Again, I'm the right person to do this because I have the skills, I have the experience, I have the drive and passion, etc. It's okay to say those things more than once. Originality is key, very, very important. You need to weave into your narrative a statement of originality in one way or another. So this is to say, we've been studying, let's go soil again, soil and fertilization and how it impacts farmers and such for hundreds and hundreds of years. But here's what I'm doing. I'm bringing in these new factors that others have not done before. So that you're illustrating how you're carving your own little niche, and that is you doing that. How is this project different from others have done? So there's going to be a foundation of science. Your lit reviews will really reflect this in your manuscripts, but you're building upon a foundation of research that's already been done. What's different about what you're doing? The originality of your project, as illustrated in your research statement, should and will be corroborated by your PI and their recommendation. So that is something that you definitely want to partner with your faculty mentor on writing your research plan, but they also need to speak about how Jane Doe's soil research here is innovative and original. This is not a continuation of my research in my research lab. This is her own research agenda. Be confident in yourself. That's really going to show that NSF is funding you and your research project, not your PI's lab. Even though your PI might be providing leadership and other resources and equipment, the NSF is funding you and your research, not your PI's research. Take ownership of your scholarly and research path and career goals. Take ownership of your experience. We like to talk about we a lot in our world here in academia. In our research lab, we did this, we did this. Well, that's great. Go ahead and mention that. But what was the I part? I specifically contributed to this bigger picture with XYZ. Take ownership of that. Be honest about the preparation and acknowledge what still needs to happen. That gap, and what are the skills or experiences that you're missing, and how are you going to gain that? Talk about how your research history supports this research, not just conducting research in general, but specifically this research project, and let your passion for the discipline and the project show. You want this to sound like this is something that you are excited about. After all, you proactively are going to graduate school. You are proactively getting that PhD, which is hard to do. Why are you doing that? You're doing that because you're passionate about something. So let that passion show in your paper. Talk about what's different. Why is yours cutting edge? Why is your state of the art your project? Projects shouldn't be incremental. When talking about your project, don't say, we've always done this by changing one little variable. Rather, be innovative and step outside of that box. Illustrate your originality. This can't be your PI's idea. This cannot be you just continuing your PI's research. And again, your PI will be confirming that in their letter of recommendation. What are you really showing the reviewers here? You're proposing a project, but you are not necessarily going to be locked into this complete proposal because, as we've talked about already, things happen, pandemics happen, life happens, new research is coming out and being published while you're doing your coursework, preparing to do your research that you need to take into account. Things happen. But what you're really showing your reviewers here is that you are capable of conducting research, of planning research, of doing due diligence. You are capable of determining original research, designing a plan that is brand new, cutting edge, not something that has been done before. You are capable of conducting scalable and feasible research, of crafting an innovative and cutting edge project, and considering risks and other important considerations. And show your acumen for this level of research. Show that you are up for the challenge. So really, that is what your research statement needs to show. So don't be worried about your research plan not being able to go through because various factors change. But what are you really showing? So kind of really think about that, reflect upon that. Images, important question that we get. Images are allowed, but they must fit into your 2-page maximum research plan statement. So you can't have 2 pages of narrative and then another page with images and graphs and appendices. All has to be within 2 pages. The NSF does specifically recommend and encourage the use of images when you're using equations. So rather than typing out equations and symbols, mixing different fonts together in your narrative, because when you upload your PDF, things can get a little wonky there. That has happened. So using an image will keep the formatting okay, not mixing different symbols and such from different fonts in with your regular narrative. And so using an image for your equation. Images, including graphs and figures, do take up valuable real estate, 2 pages. So ask yourself how purposeful the images are. How purposeful is it to include what you are proposing to include? And your images should not be too complicated to understand. Images, what are they? They are there to illustrate and tell a story. If you have to, and oftentimes you use a graph because it is going to be a lot easier to understand looking at a graph and take up a lot less space explaining by using that graph. But if putting that graph in there or an image, and then you have to spend a lot of your narrative describing that image, that's something that you want to weigh and consider there. References. Do you have to include references, include citations? You don't have to. You can get the GRFP without doing that. They do have to fit within your 2-page maximum, and it is recommended that you use them sparingly. Select the important and impactful and respected publications. If you're really relying on one piece of research here as the bedrock of your project, include that. This is an opportunity to highlight your research as well as that of those who are informing your research. So again, who are the leaders in your area of research that you are drawing from, and they're building that foundation for you. Your paper will not be reviewed by a professor or researcher in your core discipline. So keep that in mind. Okay, so we've talked about all sorts of things here, considerations, broader impacts, hooks, some writing advice. Now it's your turn to just get started. Start with an outline. This will help you map out your thoughts and really to kind of understand how much space you have. So in addition to outlining, with bullet points, go ahead and sketch out 2 pages and say, okay, the introduction, I'm going to give myself this much space for this. I'll give myself this much space for X, Y, and Z. That will help you visualize. Plan to go through multiple drafts of your personal statement and your research statement. I apologize. Proofread and edit before taking to others to proofread and edit. Utilize writing resources such as the Use Writing Center as you work on your draft. The Writing Center is not going to be specialists in your area. They are oftentimes also not PhD students. However, they are excellent at helping you outline and get started. Word processing software, spelling, and grammar checks are not always accurate. So when proofreading, be sure to check for grammar and spelling. And a note on that, identify multiple proofreading partners, faculty, mentors, classmates, other faculty that you've taken classes from and trust, your friends, your roommate, family. You want a variety of individuals from varying backgrounds. They do not all have to be scientists. They do not all have to be students in your specific area of study. Spelling and grammar feedback is important, but as mentioned, you want to place a huge emphasis on that, but the valuable feedback you're going to get from others is on your narrative, how everything flows. Ask your proofreader to provide feedback on flow of your paper, how your ideas and your research is articulated, and if they walk away with a decent understanding of what you're hoping to accomplish in your research. This is why the diversity of backgrounds among your proofreaders is really important. If everyone in your lab, they're like, oh yeah, I get what you're saying, but your creative writing MFA roommate, they read that and they're like, I understand 0% of this. That's a problem. They might not understand the science, the methodology, the data analysis, a lot of the specifics there, but they should still walk away saying, Jane or John is accomplishing X. They want to solve X. They want to answer this question. They want to impact the world in one specific way. Plan to go through several rounds of proofreading and editing. Don't write a draft and then have your PI look at it and then submit it after that. The most successful applications go through a dozen, if not more, drafts. I've had some students tell me that they've gone through 30 drafts before they submit. Now, some frequently asked questions that you might have. How many drafts of my research statement should I go through? As I just mentioned one slide before, 10 plus rounds is not uncommon and can be very, very helpful. There's always the ability to continue perfecting your paper. Those of you, particularly in PhD programs, you may have heard this saying before. What is a good dissertation? Well, a good dissertation is a done dissertation, because you can spend the next 100 years rewriting and rewriting and rewriting that manuscript, and you'll always find a new way to reframe things, clarify things. But there's a point where this is excellent and good enough and terrific for what we are trying to accomplish. So there is a point where you have to call it and say, I've done 10 rounds. This is about as good as it's going to get. Anything more is just lateral shifting of things. This is good enough to turn in now. So keep that in mind. How important is my faculty advisor in my research statement? Your faculty advisor is very important. They are a key partner here for you. They will attest to the originality of your project, as well as confirming that you have the support necessary to complete that project. This is specifically most true for second years. If you are going into your first year this fall, and if you're a rising senior this fall, reviewers understand that you might not have a significant relationship with a PI yet. Or rising seniors, you might not even have an advisor. You might not even know where you're going to school. But this is your opportunity to talk about, let's say you're a rising senior and you're looking at a couple different programs. Go ahead and say, I plan to apply to X, Y, and Z programs. But why? Mention that. They have a good program. I've been following this PI's research, and I hope to work in their lab as I weigh the different programs. I've been in conversation with this person. It's not uncommon for a PI at another university, or even where you're at, in a graduate program that you've not worked with before, but you're talking to them as you apply for school. It's not uncommon to ask them to write one of your letters of recommendation. And in some cases, they can write a very impactful letter of recommendation. But you might not have that relationship, and that's okay. You still want to make sure that you have strong recommendation writers who can speak to your research, that you've talked about with them, that it is still indeed original research, even though they might not be the one supervising it. Should I have anyone other than my faculty advisor or PI review my research plan? This is a common question. Others aren't necessarily scientists. Should I care what they have to say? Your faculty advisor is a key partner in writing a great research statement, but you do want to have that diversity of perspectives. So classmates, other NSF grad fellows, other faculty, family, roommates, friends, all great people. Additionally, non-STEM proofreaders can be valuable in gauging how well your statement is written. How is it structured? The flow of ideas. Does it make sense? Could certain things be clarified better? They might not understand the details of the science and the research, but they should be able to walk away with an idea of what you're trying to accomplish. And that is really valuable in itself, just to gauge from those non-STEM proofreaders. My PI is conducting research that is fascinating, and I want to continue it in a new direction. Is this allowed? We're in a gray space here. The answer is it depends. The NSF is not utilizing the GRFP to fund your PI and your PI's research initiatives. They're funding you and your new innovative research agenda. GRFP research must be original. If you're continuing your PI's research agenda, that's a no. But let's think of it this way. You chose a PI, you chose a program largely because there's a PI there, a faculty member that is a specialist in your niche area, and you want to learn from them, work under them in their lab, and they're going to be the best person out there to supervise your project. Great. Okay, so if that's the case, chances are they are also going to be a leading researcher. There's a good chance that they're going to be the leading researcher out there that you may be quoting in your lit review. So if you're taking your PI's completed and published research, just like you would from anyone else that you are talking about in your lit review, that is building that foundation that you're building your new and innovative research project on top of, that's great. That is, as long as there's cutting edge and innovative and original direction with that, you're in a good space. I had a student a few months ago, they're working in a particular lab, and the faculty member is just that. They were a leading researcher, but this student was coming from an interdisciplinary. He had his undergrad in one place, and he's now in a slightly different discipline. And so his project is still this specific science, but through an interdisciplinary lens. And it's through that he's saying the published research is flawed because they're leaving out this key variable. And so that's what his project was built upon. It was very original by having that key variable and building this new idea, a new project on top of what his current PI had published already. So we have various resources for you. The annual solicitation is available at nsf-grfp.org. This is going to be the solicitation for last October's cycle. The new solicitation for this upcoming application cycle will be published end of June, early July. The portal will open in August and will close in October. Previous workshops, tools, resources, various handouts and guides, videos of these presentations, copies of these slides are available at NSF-GRFP or nsf-grfp.utah.edu/workshops, specifically for the workshops. Your faculty mentor is key. The University of Utah Writing Center and Graduate Fellowship Advising, that's what my office does here. I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one, fellowships@gradschool.utah.edu. We have one more workshop in our summer series next week where we will be discussing broader impacts. The NSF places such a huge emphasis on intellectual merit and broader impacts. For the most part, grad students do well with intellectual merit. It's the broader impacts that if there's a struggle, it's the broader impacts. So we're going to talk specifically about that. So please join us next week. If you're not able to join us due to scheduling conflicts, the recording will be on our website shortly thereafter. And then again, my information, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to meet with you one-on-one to answer any questions that you might have, or to walk through your outline or your drafts, etc. So what we're going to do now is stop the recording, and we will have time for your questions and concerns that you might have. So bear with us for one moment.